To fully update the situation, and throughout all of this and the terrible situation that is there, we will be updating the public very directly at regular intervals with the most up-to-date information we have. Thank you very much. That's all I've got for now. Thank you.
Well, that was Charles Clarke in the last half an hour as we see pictures of the bus explosion in Tavistock Square, and of course that whole area now cordoned off with dozens and dozens of emergency services vehicles there. And we were hearing from our correspondent a short while ago in the hotel nearby saying that there would be secondary blasts as police ensure that that area now is safe. And there you see highlighted the bus with just about all of that top deck blown off in this explosion. Well, whilst we watch these pictures, let's speak to Virginia Crompton. She's in the Euston Road. We spoke to her earlier. Thanks for joining us again here on this BBC News special. I wonder if you could just describe for us, first of all, what you're currently seeing.
Well, I'm standing very near Tavistock Place, where the bus incident took place, and a lot of people near me are wrapped in foil blankets. Clearly must have been involved in some way, but everybody looks well. What's alarming me is that I just went to talk to the police about whether there would be a statement and what had happened and whether anyone was injured, and the policeman said that as he understood it, this was not the major incident in London, and that there had been a further incident at King's Cross. And this policeman, I stress it was one policeman, said he thought there had been a train crash and that there were a lot of people injured.
And are the casualties still emerging where you are?
Where I am, I can't see casualties. I can see a lot of people wrapped in foil blankets who must be being treated for shock, but nobody appears to have any injuries. I'm trying to go now towards King's Cross, and the policeman said that he thought there had been separate incidents in Russell Square, Euston Square, Tavistock Place and King's Cross, and that he thought that King's Cross had also been the site of a train crash.
And from the way you describe it as a member of the public, just total confusion.
Well, it's very confusing, very confusing. There are police everywhere, fire engines everywhere, ambulances everywhere, which is obviously a good thing. A lot of roads are closed. It's not easy to get around. I don't know if you can hear the sirens in the background. It's very, very hard to know what's happening. And clearly, if the information I've just had from the police is correct, there have been multiple incidents in a very, very small area of London.
And for someone like yourself, how worrying is that? Do you know even in which direction to go? Well,
I was initially walking through King's Cross when people were coming out of the first incident underground at King's Cross, and I thought I will get away from this area with lots of people, it's chaos, and walk towards Russell Square. I almost got in a bus. The next thing I knew, there was a huge bang and a bus had exploded just around the corner from where I was. I decided to go into a park, Gordon Square Gardens, because I thought that would be a safe place. And now, having come out of there and talked to the police, it seems like there have been many other incidents.
All right, Virginia Crompton, thanks so much for joining us once again. Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
We're just hearing about more of the disruption that all this has caused. Of course, the entire tube network is closed, and Transport for London confirms that all Zone 1 bus services, that's in central London, have been suspended, and extra checks are being carried out in depots. We're also hearing from Gleneagles that the Prime Minister is due to make a statement shortly. We hear from Singapore that London's Mayor, Ken Livingstone, is on his way back to London. We're joined now by Roy Ram, a former commander of specialist operations at the Metropolitan Police. What do you make of all this?
Well, it's obviously a tragedy. I mean, what we're seeing here is a series of incidents which I think it's unrealistic to look at them in any sense as coincidental. This looks very much like a planned series of attacks. I think, one shouldn't speculate too much, but seeing the number of incidents on the Underground and now on the buses across London, and the timing of these incidents, A, in the rush hour, and B, following London's success as the Olympic City, this is has all the hallmarks of a very carefully structured and timed terrorist attack. As I say, one shouldn't speculate too much, but those are the hallmarks that are there, and that's what we're facing. And I think what we're also seeing is an amazing kicking from the emergency services who are putting into place the kind of practice that they've done at Bank Station recently, and realising that these were major targets, and they are actually responding, I think, very well at the moment, and we're getting very good reports from the public who are saying that the emergency services are there and on the scene and acting very properly.
What is the evidence that terrorism then was involved in the trouble in the Underground?
Well, I think that what you said, and I emphasise that there is no hard evidence yet, but what you are seeing is a series of explosions which people are describing as not electrical, that very, very violent explosions, all happening at the same time, and then almost beyond any sense that there could be a coincidence, incidents happening on the buses. It is very difficult to think of any other cause for this series of explosions other than deliberate human action.
We heard, though, earlier, much earlier, within the half an hour of the first bit of trouble at 10 to 9, the transport people, and I think it was Metronet, saying that there'd been a surge in power in the Underground.
Well, I think, yes, I heard that too, and one was hopeful that that may have been the cause, but subsequently I think it's been reported that the National Grid have said that they have no evidence of any power surge or any report of a surge going into the underground system. And indeed, the kinds of eyewitness reports that are coming from the people who were travelling on the underground that we're all seeing on the news media at the moment do not make it look as though it were a power surge. But I do emphasise there is no evidence of it yet, but it is very difficult to see how there could be anything other than human activity to cause this kind of mayhem on the underground and on the buses. I think if it were just confined to the underground, I think at that time, yes, you could look for some other cause, maybe a power surge. But the fact that you have incidents underground, the fact that you have incidents on the buses, all aimed at the mass transport system, and aimed at the mass transport system during the rush hour and following this event and all the other political events that are going on around at the moment, it has all the hallmarks of a terrorist attack.
Roy Ram, thank you.
Let me show you the latest pictures from University College Hospital and the people arriving there. Some of the wounded. These pictures coming to us on a video phone. So just explaining the quality there of these pictures. But these some of the first ambulances arriving at University College Hospitals. Of course, all the London hospitals will have an emergency plan in place. And as we stay with these pictures, let me bring in Jeremy Hillman from the BBC, who's at another of the hospitals at St Mary's in Paddington. And tell us what is happening there, Jeremy.
Hi, Matthew. They are gearing up for major arrivals here. The first ambulance with casualties just arrived a couple of minutes ago. There are many sort of doctors and nurses waiting outside the front of accidents and emergency with rows of wheelchairs, blankets and stretchers. I've heard that they've removed all of the nurses, non-essential nurses, from the normal wards, and they're all up preparing accident and emergency at the moment, and they are basically in a waiting situation, waiting for casualties to arrive.
So as yet, no casualties where you are?
No, from what I understand, they're trying to utilise the Hilton Hotel up the road for triage. So casualties are being first taken to the Hilton for assessment, and then I'm assuming the most seriously injured are being brought straight to St Mary's from the Hilton Hotel on the Edware Road.
And are officials there being given any word of the sorts of numbers to expect?
They haven't been given any specific numbers from the activity here and the number of hospital staff arriving. I'm assuming they're expecting a major number of casualties here.
OK, Jeremy, thanks very much. As we stay with these pictures, let me also tell you that Scotland Yard are saying that they will be setting up a casualty bureau within the next half an hour, with telephone numbers for people to call if they're worried about loved ones. So Scotland Yard saying that they will be setting up a casualty bureau within the next half an hour with telephone numbers for people to call if they're worried.
We still have no confirmation of any deaths, but a number of eyewitnesses we've spoken to have talked about seeing bodies under sheets on pavements in various parts of London. And also this crisis seems to be affecting other areas outside the capital now. We're hearing from Swindon that the station has been evacuated there, the railway station. This is because of what's described as a security incident. And also a similar kind of incident reported from Brighton, where the railway station has been closed. With me now is Gordon Carrera, BBC's security correspondent. We were talking to the former Metropolitan police officer a few moments ago, who said that he had little doubt that this was a coordinated series of terrorist attacks.
There is still no official confirmation, but security sources are saying it's too early to say, but there are strong indications that it could be, and it does look like some kind of terrorist activity. That's for a number of reasons. Firstly, the timing, the G8 summit, that's a date that's been well known in advance, allowing people to plan such an activity such as this. Secondly, is the nature of the attacks. Attacks on the transport infrastructure at rush hour. That is very similar to what happened in Madrid in March 2004 and was carried out by an Al-Qaeda related group. So I think the indications are strong, but it is still too early to be sure, and so we shouldn't absolutely be sure of that yet. But I think it's looking increasingly likely as the morning has gone on, and it is right to say that the shift from the talking about power surge, as soon as we saw there was an explosion on a bus as well, and perhaps more than one, it became clear that this was something more than just a power surge on the tubes, and then it began to look terrorist related. As we speak, Gordon, we're seeing pictures of the Royal London Hospital. A number of London hospitals are on alert with the wounded being taken to them. Presumably the security forces were on alert. I mean, everyone knows there's a G8 summit going on. In the past, that has been a target for people who wanted to cause trouble. Absolutely, a target for anti-globalisation protesters. And I say that the security was very high up at Gleneagles, and that was the focus. But I think people wouldn't have necessarily expected something in London. Now, I think the expectation would be that this kind of attack would be carried out by Al-Qaeda. That's the expectation. I mean, you can't absolutely rule out other groups and other possibilities, such as anti-globalisation, extremists trying to disrupt the G8, or even dissident Irish Republican. You can't rule that out, but I think this does have the hallmarks of an Al-Qaeda-inspired attack. The bomb on a bus, perhaps more than one bus. I can't remember that happening before. That hasn't happened before. We had bombs on the train, on commuter trains in Madrid, and we've obviously had the use of aircraft as weapons and attempts to sabotage the aircraft. So transport infrastructure is often a target, but we've not seen that same kind of incident on a bus before. We're looking now at Tavistock Place, where that double-decker bus had its top completely ripped off. There it is. According to eyewitnesses, there was a loud explosion and a number of casualties there. And that is the scene where one of the eyewitnesses said they saw bodies under sheets on the pavement. What kind of an explosion, what kind of a bomb? I mean, presumably it would be quite easy, wouldn't it, to get a bomb on a bus like that? Absolutely. We were told by one of the people we spoke to earlier, who was an American tourist here, that she thought it was a tourist bus. Well, it's almost impossible to protect the bus and the tube infrastructure from someone carrying a device onto it. If you wanted to try and protect that kind of transport from those kind of attacks, you'd need to have metal and explosive detectors at every bus stop, on every bus, on every train. That's not really possible without bringing the transport system to a halt. So it is very difficult. In Madrid, the model was people bringing on backpacks full of explosives and leaving them on a train and detonating them with mobile phones. There have been some reports that mobile phone may have been switched off in parts of London. That would fit in with possibly concern over that theory, because if they are used to detonate devices, then there is the possibility of the government switching down parts of the mobile phone network to stop that happening. There's likely to be very intense activity in Whitehall. Coburn, which is the emergency committee's been called. They've been meeting to look at this. That's the standard procedure in any major incident, terrorist or not. You can also expect that the Joint Terrorism Assessment Centre, JTAC, which is housed in MI5, will be looking at what information has come in, maybe recently, whether there are any signs, whether there is any evidence of who might have carried this out, if indeed it's a terrorist attack. But as I said, that hasn't been confirmed yet officially, but the indications are making it look like it is some kind of terrorist activity.
Gordon, for the moment, thank you.
As we stay with these pictures, let's try to bring you right up to date with the facts as we have them. We know about that confirmed explosion at Tavistock Square. We also know about the confirmed explosion at Aldgate East. We know about a confirmed explosion at Edware Road, and there, as we take you to the map, of course, so many other transport centres also affected, with evacuations, we know, at Liverpool Street, at King's Cross, with people emerging from those stations all the time. And we're also hearing from Downing Street telling us that Tony Blair is to make a live televised statement on the explosions in London at midday. That coming in the last few seconds from Downing Street. These are the pictures from the Royal London Hospital, because casualties are being taken to just about all of the main London hospitals, all of them, of course, on emergency alert. We were hearing from one of our correspondents at the hospital, with doctors and nurses being taken away from routine operations. Well, I'm glad to say that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, is in our Westminster studios. Good morning, and thank you so much for your time here this morning. I wonder if you could start by giving us the facts as you know them at the moment.
Well, the situation is confused, but it is slowly clearing, and the messages that I need to give are that the Metropolitan Police, in accordance with the London Emergency Plan, is now coordinating London's response to these events. We think there are about 6 explosions. One of them is on a bus. The others are connected to tube stations. There are many casualties, but as I say, the London Emergency Plan is working, and they are being taken to hospitals. There are just a series of very short messages at the moment that we need to give. The first is to stay where you are. All of London's transport is currently disabled or stopped, whether that's buses or trains. So the safest thing that everybody can do is to stay where they are. Secondly, please do not call the emergency services at the moment unless there is a life-threatening situation. And thirdly, that we will return with information as soon as possible. But it is a situation for which we have planned and prepared, and the emergency services are all working together as one, and we will soon be in a position to be able to clarify issues further.
You mentioned 6 explosions at the start of your answer. I wonder if you could just be specific and list exactly where those explosions are, because, of course, through the morning there have been so many different reports from so many different places.
As far as we know, there are events which may be explosions at Edware Road, at King's Cross, at Liverpool Street, at Russell Square, at Aldgate East and at Moorgate. But some of those, I mean, it is still, everybody has to understand, it is still a confusing situation in which reports are coming in from a number of places. And one of the things that would be most helpful is if the media in general do not speculate on what might be the causes, what might be everything else, and cause more alarm and concern than people will obviously feel at the moment. The situation is being controlled, and we will be able to give information as soon as possible.
You started the interview by saying there was a very clear emergency plan which has now been triggered, reassuring the public. Do you acknowledge that there will be a degree of panic, certainly, amongst people in central London?
Well, there'll certainly be a degree of concern. People have seen the pictures, they know the accounts, but you know, this is a very large city. In which a very significant and sophisticated emergency operation is now swinging into effect. We are connecting to the other police forces, the City of London, the British Transport Police. We're connected to the LAS, and we are gradually bringing order to the situation. The message is that if you have not so far been affected, then just stay exactly where you are for the time being until the situation clears. We will be opening a casualty bureau very shortly, and that casualty bureau number will be made public.
You mentioned many casualties. What is the number that you're thinking of? Are you talking about scores or are you talking about hundreds?
Well, of course, it's very difficult to give that answer, because if we have got a situation in which events have taken place in the underground or with an explosion on a bus, there will be lots of flying glass, there will be people inhaling smoke and so on. So to give a total number, I think, would be inappropriate. What I do know is that we're operating a proper triage system, and the most serious casualties will already be in treatment, and others who are described on one or other of the programme as walking wounded will be treated in due course. I just really want to reassure the public that the situation is steadily coming under control, and we will then start to understand exactly what has happened.
Do you know of fatalities at the moment?
I'm not prepared to say that at the moment, because I just do not know either the detail or the numbers. The important message is stay where you are, stay safe, don't travel because there's not much ability to travel, and that the Casualty Bureau will be opening soon. Thanks very much.
You spoke of the 6 explosions. Just take us through the moment that you heard of the first one, and how soon the second, third, fourth and fifth happened after that.
I'm not going to get into that level of detail. I've got to give out a number of public service messages like this, but we will be holding further news broadcasts in due course. Thanks very much.
Do you have an idea, just before you go, as to who might be responsible?
I'm not going to speculate on that at this moment.
OK, well, Sir Ian Blair, I know you were short of time, but thanks for spending so much time going through the detail of that. That was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair.
So let me update you on the travel situation, the transport situation in London. The tube network is completely closed, and no buses are running in Zone 1 being central London. And we've just heard the Metropolitan Police Commissioner advising people who are in London to stay where you are. As in using his words, he said all transport is disabled. He's advised people not to call on the emergency services unless they are threatened, unless their lives are threatened. Let's talk now to Keith Norman, who's from the train union Aslef. What information have you got, Keith, about what happened on the tube this morning?
Well, very little, actually. It's still very sketchy. We started the morning believing that there were power surges, but obviously, looking at the pictures and the other things in the media, it's obviously something more serious than that. We do believe at one stage that one of our members, train driver, has been injured, but as I say, the reports coming through are very sketchy.
We've had reports of a train, or perhaps more, being derailed, and people having to use, emergency services having to use pickaxes and so on to get a hole, to get access to the train for people to get off. Is that right?
I can't confirm that. I've not heard that.
So what is the drill if a train is derailed underground and there's a power surge and soot is falling? How are people supposed to easily make their escape?
Well, LUL are very experienced in this kind of operation. They switch the power off if necessary and detrain people, or in other cases they can send another train in and take people off and take them back to a place of safety. So LUL are very, very experienced in dealing with this kind of incident, or this kind of an emergency in a tunnel.
When you talk about a power surge, what do you mean?
Well, obviously there is a set amount of power that the trains are required to run with, and sometimes because of maybe adverse weather conditions or a lightning strike, something of that nature, there becomes a surge of power occurs and it knocks out the equipment.
And why should this paralyse the entire network, or do you think a decision has been made that that's the best and safest thing to do?
I think until the actual cause of this disturbance in London is established, I think LUL have done the right thing in shutting the system down.
As a precaution?
I do believe that, so I think they've done the right thing as a precaution, yes.
Keith Norman, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, we heard Sir Ian Blair say there were many casualties. Let's go to the Royal London Hospital and speak to our reporter Nick Thatcher, who is there. And Nick, how many have been coming to the hospital where you are?
Well, all the hospital here are saying at the moment is that they are ready to receive, and Matthew, they have been receiving casualties all morning. We've had ambulances coming to this hospital, one of the major hospitals in East London. If I stand aside, you can probably see one of the air ambulances landing on the roof. That's been a very familiar scene throughout the morning as well, as casualties have been ferried here. This is one of the major hospitals in East London. It's very close to Aldgate East. It's also very close to Liverpool Street. And the buses that you can see behind me, these have come from central London. I've been looking at the numbers on the buses. These are buses that are coming from the sort of King's Cross area. On board have been walking wounded being taken into this hospital behind me. As the buses have come back out here, we've been seeing in the buses loads of water that's been provided by the train companies, the mainline train companies, GNER from King's Cross. So walking wounded being brought on a fleet of buses from the King's Cross area to this hospital in East London.
Reuters news agency just a little earlier was quoting one doctor talking about 90 casualties simply from the Aldgate Underground station alone. Are you seeing that level of numbers?
The first few ambulances that came here, Matthew, there were people on stretchers. They weren't walking wounded. And as the morning went on, we were seeing more coming again and again and again. Then we got reports of that second explosion at Liverpool Street, unconfirmed at the moment, but we saw a fleet of ambulances take off in a completely different direction from this hospital. But as casualties are being brought in and taken off the ambulances, those ambulances are being restocked with supplies and they're going out straight again, sirens blaring. And the traffic around here, it has to be said, pretty gridlocked at the moment. It's very difficult to move in this part of East London. The police trying to stop the major routes and keeping the hospital entrance open, of course, and telling people who've come for routine appointments today that this hospital is closed for anything other than emergency treatment.
Yes, Sir Ian Blair from the Metropolitan Police were talking about a short while ago. The Department of Health have just issued a statement saying that there is a plan, reassuring the public there is a plan that is in place that is triggered immediately for these sorts of things, and that, I assume, is what you're seeing there.
Yes, we always knew that this hospital, the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, would be a major hospital to respond to a major incident. And when I got here this morning, no ambulances had arrived at that stage, but already the hospital staff were outside on the front, the porters were lined up with wheelchairs ready to take the walking wounded. Then we saw a trickle of ambulances, first of all, but they were ready to receive them. Those people who've been coming into the hospital, not needing emergency treatment, being told to go away. Those hospital staff that are being used in other departments being told to come and lend their help here. But the hospital themselves very, very confused as to what's happened. They're seeing a number of different injuries, and at the moment their priority, of course, is to treat those injuries, not to fill us in with details of what they think may have happened.
OK, Nick, thanks very much. Let me, as Nick is there and we move to some of the pictures, let me give you a statement from St Mary's Hospital, very near Edgware Road, the scene, of course, of another of the explosions. Casualty figures from that hospital, and St Mary's saying 4 people critically ill, 8 people seriously injured, and several minor injuries. And they also give a list of the types of injuries, and they talk about limb damage, burns, cuts, head injuries, and chest problems. Just like the politicians, the hospital also making it clear they will be issuing further briefings, further updates through the course of the morning. But their latest figures from St Mary's, just one of the main London hospitals, talking about 4 critically ill there, 8 seriously injured, and several other people having minor injuries.
It's now 11:30. Let me update you. There have been at least 6 explosions on the public transport system in London during the morning rush hour. It's caused chaos in parts of the capital. Police have confirmed at least 2 people have been killed and scores seriously injured. The London Underground has been shut down and all central London buses have been suspended. The first blasts were reported just before 9 o'clock between Aldgate and Liverpool Street stations and at Edgware Road station. Reports speak of people emerging from Aldgate station covered in blood. Another witness says some people have been trapped at Euston station. Another explosion has destroyed a double-decker bus in Tavistock Square. And we're getting reports of another explosion on Aldgate Road near Liverpool Street Station. All London hospitals are on major incident alert.
Now, let me bring you news coming to us from the BBC's security correspondent, Frank Gardner. And he is telling us that Arab sources who monitor Al-Qaeda have told the BBC that they believe today's explosions in London are almost certainly the work of Al-Qaeda. I'll repeat that because that's important information coming into us. Frank Gardner, the BBC security correspondent, saying that Arab sources who monitor Al-Qaeda have told the BBC they believe today's explosions in London are almost certainly the work of Al-Qaeda.
And we're just hearing the police are now saying that there are 2 people dead at Aldgate East. That's Aldgate East. 2 people have died there.
Now let's go very close to the scene of that bus explosion in Tavistock Square. Fergal Parkinson from the BBC is there. And Fergal, we're looking at the pictures of the bus with the whole of the top deck ripped off. Just tell us what is going on there at the moment.
Yes, Matthew, a scene of some confusion here still. Emergency services are still arriving. This bus, the incident on this bus happened in Tavistock Square, which is just around the corner, slightly out of view from where I'm standing here on Tavistock Place. The police have set up a cordon of about 150, 200 yards around where the incident took place. There are a number of people who were in the area when it happened still around. The businesses, the cafes, the hotels, and even local residents here are bringing teas and coffees out to the people, and a number of people who would be described as walking wounded are sitting on the pavement. They describe just around 9 o'clock this morning a large explosion. They say glass was flying through the air, so was dust and debris, and it came from the direction of the bus, which had its top half completely ripped off. As we speak, Matthew, more ambulances are arriving, and a major incident support vehicle from London Ambulances just driving past me and going into the area. I've also seen 3 National Blood Service blood vans arrive with their blue lights flashing into the Tavistock Square area. This area of London is very busy. It's near quite a lot of transport hubs. It's not that far away from King's Cross, and it's only a few hundred yards away from the headquarters of one of the National Police Forces. It's very near the headquarters of the British Transport Police. And some of their officers are running in and out of their headquarters, providing assistance to some of the other forces too. A scientific support unit from the British Transport Police, wearing fluorescent jackets, has just left their headquarters and run around the corner to the scene. So although the police have cordoned off the area and there are lots of ambulances and lots of fire engines, still scene of some confusion, with many of the people obviously caught up in this explosion still here at Tavistock Place, and still yet to be either take themselves to hospital or be transported to hospital.
Yes, as we see the pictures, it's understandable the confusion in the situation, but are officials there saying anything about fatalities at that particular blast?
There are reports, a number of people described seeing a fatality around the corner near the bus, although that hasn't been confirmed by the emergency services here. Their main focus at the moment is trying to get people back away from the scene, which is proving very difficult because of the huge amount of people here, because they're actually walking back in the direction of King's Cross, which has also been evacuated and blocked off too. But the emergency services here have all the senior officers are arriving here, and as I say, just a few moments ago, some vans drove past carrying blood supplies. A colleague of mine who's very near the scene described 3 ambulances just leaving the scene here 10 minutes ago, carrying some people. We don't know whether how severe their injuries are, but some ambulances, 3 ambulances left here just a matter of minutes ago, still carrying people.
OK, Fergal, Parkinson, thanks a lot.
We're looking now at the first pictures we've had from Russell Square, near where that bus exploded. Just to recap on what the Metropolitan Police Commissioner told us a few minutes ago, in case you didn't hear him, Sir Ian Blair, he talked about 6 explosions, possibly 1 on a bus, many casualties, and he said the emergency plan is working. His advice to Londoners was quite simple: stay where you are, because he said all transport has been disabled, and don't call the emergency services unless your life is threatened. Let's talk now to Christian Wolmar, who's a railway expert. He's in our Westminster newsroom. Christian, have you sorted out in your mind what might have gone wrong with the Underground? This all started at 10 to 9 with a statement from one of the operating companies talking about a power surge.
Yes, I mean, I think that clearly now that power surge might have been caused by an explosion at some sort of substation. London Underground gets its electricity in various places around the network. It goes through substations and into the system. If you damaged one of those, it might then send a power surge down the line. So clearly that obviously must be the best theory at the moment. I think one should emphasise that this whole episode is rather different from the one in Madrid. Although obviously there are casualties here, they're nothing like, by the sound of it, as severe as they were in Madrid. The target seems to have caused absolute maximum disruption to London, and in that, of course, they've been very successful.
So why is the entire London Tube network closed now? Is that because this is what the power surge does, or is it a precautionary measure which they've taken?
No, it's not what the power surge does. No, they're different lines, different power systems and all that. No, this is a precautionary move by London Underground, as they've also taken all the buses out of the Central Zone 1, and basically this is a response to. Clearly, it's a planned response to a series of blasts around the capital. Clearly, after Madrid, this was considered at a very high level by London Underground, and this is clearly the plan that has been implemented.
Turning from the tube now to the buses, we know of at least 1 explosion on a bus. We were told by an American tourist who saw it all happen, this is the Tavistock Square one, that the bus was a tourist bus, a double-decker bus.
Yes, there's a lot of these in central London these days. They're mostly kind of ex-London Transport buses, which are then taken over by tourist companies, and basically you buy a ticket and you can hop on and off the bus all day, going around all the major sites like Trafalgar Square and Buckingham Palace and the like. And this is clearly considered to be a sort of target that would economically affect London the most, because if they're targeting the tourists, it's going to put tourists off coming here, and that's basically the aim of it. I mean, it must be stressed that the transport system is vulnerable to this sort of attack. There's not a lot you can do. You can't check everybody coming on a bus for what they're carrying. I mean, it just is not a practical proposition.
So what is the situation? I mean, you've been travelling around London this morning. We heard from the Metropolitan Police Commissioner saying that all transport is disabled. What did you see?
Well, fortunately, I was on my bicycle and managed to get through London. I must say, apart from people on their bicycles, and it was almost impossible to kind of get through. I went very close to the Tavistock Square bomb, and I must say it was scenes of utter and total chaos. Literally tens of thousands of people wandering around the streets, not knowing quite where to go, lots of roads blocked off with police tape, and a kind of sense of really something like kind of the Blitz. You know, we really felt we'd kind of been attacked from all parts. Just nobody quite knew what to do, precisely because there were bombs in different parts of London, which meant that nobody quite knew what direction was safe to go in.
Thank you, Christian Wolmar.
Well, we were just looking at pictures there from Aldgate, but of course another of the explosions at Edware Road station, and eyewitnesses there said there'd been a big explosion.
This morning. Just coming towards Edware Road station, and then also there's this explosion right
light, big white, appeared, and then it was just smoke everywhere. In the tunnel, we was trying to close the doors because there was just smoke, you couldn't breathe. Then we all got down low to get under the smoke because it was just like so much there. And after about 10 minutes, the smoke disappeared and was able to open everything up, but there was so much screaming and people saying help, so it was a bit frightening.
Did you see anyone hurt?
We was in the carriage back and to one, so when we went past, there was like hardly any train left. It was all in pieces. There's pieces on the track as well, everywhere.
There was just a train was passing another train in the tunnel just outside Edware Road, and there was a huge bang, and our train, all the lights went out and there was a lot of smoke. I believe it's the second carriage. There's quite a lot of injured people in it.
Well, let's speak now to Julian, the Chief Executive from St Mary's Hospital in London. Thank you for your time this morning. I wonder if you could give us the latest update from your hospital.
Yes, I can. So far this morning, we've received the following numbers of cases. We've been treating 4 people with critical injuries, including loss of limbs and serious blast injuries. We've got a further 8 people in a serious condition, including head injuries, lacerations and smoke inhalation, and a further 14 people at the moment with more minor injuries, including things like temporary hearing loss from what we assume was some sort of blast that they were subject to.
And are you expecting more people to arrive at your hospital?
Yes, the arrangement here is that there's a large hotel right next to the underground station, the Metropolitan. There's been a sort of a treatment centre set up there where further patients are being assessed in terms of the nature of their injuries. We understand that the more serious cases there will be coming to St Mary's for further treatment. We don't know yet quite how many, but we have been told by our emergency service colleagues that we'll be receiving more people shortly.
And we know that all of the hospitals across London, the major hospitals, have an emergency plan that is triggered in circumstances like that. I wonder if you could just go through and explain to us how that plan works.
It's for St Mary's, it's a well-rehearsed plan. We've had similar incidents, including the Paddington rail crash. So what happens is that we get notified by the emergency service. We then have a system of rapid call-out of all of the key clinical staff in the hospital to report to specific stations within the hospital, mostly in A&E. We then have an arrangement where senior clinicians clear various parts of the hospital to enable us to receive larger than normal numbers of cases. This includes standing down all routine surgery in our operating theatres, looking at all of our inpatient beds to see those patients that can be sent home without compromising their care, obviously, but clearing as many beds as possible within the hospital. We also clear and cancel immediately all of our outpatient activity so that we create space to treat more minor injuries as well. That's the basic way in which we get ourselves within the space of really half an hour or so, or to an hour. We gear ourselves very rapidly to providing emergency services in these sorts of circumstances.
And that is the set plan, but of course, in human terms, this must be extremely distressing.
Yes, it is. It is, of course. Our staff in A&E on a day-to-day basis obviously have to deal with these sorts of circumstances, but the injuries concerned in some instances can be very distressing. Fortunately, in this case, I can also confirm that there do not appear to be any children involved, at least in terms of what we've seen so far today.
OK, Julian, Nettle, I'll let you get away. I know you have a lot to do there at the hospital. Thanks so much for your time.
Well, the time now is 12:15. It's just a few minutes short of 3 hours since all this began. And let me update you on the current situation as we know it. There have been a series of explosions on the public transport system in London during the morning rush hour, which police fear could have been a coordinated attack. Scotland Yard say there have been at least 6 explosions across the capital. At least 2 people have been confirmed dead and there are many casualties. The Prime Minister is to make a statement at midday from the G8 summit in Gleneagles. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, told us that he's concerned that this is a coordinated attack. Let's speak now to another eyewitness to the explosion. No, in fact, we're going to go to our Home Affairs editor, Mark Easton, who's been at King's Cross all morning. What is the situation now, Mark?
Well, the situation has been developing here over the last couple of hours. When I arrived shortly after 9 o'clock this morning, I saw a number of people walking wounded with the now familiar black faces, black feet and arms. Since then, the numbers have increased quite dramatically. They've had 4 double-decker buses, which they've been using as treatment centres for the less seriously injured. I must have seen 60 or 70 people brought up, many in tears, many with lacerations to their faces. One man was hobbling, his foot was clearly injured, another man with a huge bandage around his head. Shortly after that, slightly more seriously injured people were brought into that area beside King's Cross Station. I saw one woman in a wheelchair. Her leg appeared to be extremely badly injured. There was a huge amount of blood. Another woman I saw in an ambulance, and she was being given oxygen and also had injuries to her leg. Since then, one ambulance has left, but a number of I think at least 3 or 4 ambulances have since arrived at high speed, and it appears that more seriously injured people are now being brought up from King's Cross Underground Station.
Mark, have you been able to piece together any kind of description of what went wrong under there? Was there an explosion at King's Cross Underground Station?
Well, there was certainly an explosion underground. Exactly where it was on the network, I'm not sure. What I can tell you from a number of victims of this explosion who I've spoken to is that they were in tube trains. There was a very loud bang, a loud explosion, followed by a billowing black smoke, thick black smoke that covered all their faces in this black soot. All the electrics went out, and shortly afterwards, emergency lighting came on, but there was widespread panic and screaming at that point. A number of people tried to break the windows of tube trains, and in the course of trying to smash them with umbrellas and shoes and anything they could find, a number of people were injured during the course of that. And indeed, there were further injuries as people tried to clamber out through smashed windows and onto the tracks. But it is becoming clear that as well as the smoke injuries that occurred further, closer to the station, I think, and they were the first to emerge from King's Cross. I think that what is clear is that there was some sort of explosion on a train, and that people are now being brought up from closer to the blast, and they, of course, are suffering much more serious injuries.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, as we stay with these pictures, we were hearing only a short while ago from officials at St Mary's hospitals. We have got pictures of some of the walking wounded, the casualties arriving at the Royal London Hospital, another of the major hospitals that have been receiving casualties this morning. And let me just tell you, before we actually show the pictures, that some of these pictures are disturbing. So if you want to look away, please do. Let's just take a look at some of the pictures coming from the Royal London, because Nick Thatcher telling us a little earlier about just the wave after wave of ambulances arriving there at the hospital, and he was saying that, of course, this hospital close to a couple of the blasts, and there you see. Let us just have a look at these pictures as some of the casualties emerge.
We still have no clear picture of the number of casualties, although we were told by the Metropolitan Police Commissioner that there were many casualties. And we heard a few minutes ago from St Mary's Hospital that there were 4 critically injured people there, and 8 seriously injured, and 14 with minor injuries.
Yes, St Mary's saying no children involved, and I suppose that would tally with the fact that this series of blasts has happened around the commuting time, the height of the commuting time of the day. But those are the pictures from the Royal London. And we also saw, whilst we were speaking to Nick Thatcher, that helicopters were also arriving bringing in more casualties. I think I'm right in saying that the Royal London so far looks as if it has received the most number of casualties, but as Phil was saying, Crispin Black was saying, many casualties, but as yet we don't know any sort of exact number, and that of course chimes with the fact that so many people still will be in the tunnels and emerging, and so the various plans that both government and hospitals, well, they've only realistically just started. Well, of course, what is also going on, a variety of political meetings. We knew Cabinet was meeting earlier in the day. We know there's going to be a statement in the House of Commons. Let's go to Downing Street and speak to our political correspondent, Joe Coburn, who is there. And Joe, what is the latest that you are hearing from ministers?
Well, an hour ago, Charles Clarke, the Home Secretary, stood here and gave us a statement and updated us as far as he was willing to tell us at that time. Cabinet ministers have been going in and out of number 10 behind me all morning. They had a regular scheduled cabinet meeting anyway, and of course that turned into something quite different, an emergency meeting following the series of explosions that have been reported. Charles Clarke called it a terrible situation and terrible injuries. He also announced to us that actually Cobra had come into force, and that is the special emergency committee that involves government ministers, emergency services and all the intelligence agencies, obviously showing the level of this crisis at this precise moment. But he said that the police had overall command. I think people are coming out of Downing Street now. Jack Straw, the Foreign Secretary, just leaving. He had gone in really half an hour ago with the Defence Secretary, John Reid, with the Home Secretary, as I say, the Transport Secretary and the Health Secretary, Patricia Hewitt, all the people relevant after what's happened. Coming out, we're just waiting to hear whether any of the other cabinet ministers are coming out of number 10 behind me. There's going to be a lot of activity here. They're now obviously preparing for a statement in the House of Commons by Charles Clarke, and that will be followed by the Prime Minister up at Gleneagles.
Joe, they have been careful in the words they've chosen to use so far, but Frank Gardner, the BBC security correspondent, saying Arab sources who monitor Al-Qaeda have told the BBC they believe today's explosions in London are almost certainly the work of Al-Qaeda. Have they said anything at all to you in the various conversations that you've had about who they think might be responsible or what they think is responsible?
They won't even go down that route, as one of the press officers here actually said. They're not talking about who's responsible or even what the primary cause has been. That, if it comes at all, will probably come in the statements that are made in the House by the Home Secretary or by the Prime Minister himself, Tony Blair. I think they want to be very careful until they've established exactly what's happened. What they're concentrating on here at the moment very much are the logistics, the practical side of things, trying to deal with the casualties and the incidents across London on the public transport system and get that all under control. But of course, privately, they will be trying to find out exactly what has happened and who is responsible. It may be some time before we have any confirmation of that from any of the political sources here.
Just two sentences, Joe, before you go. We talked about the comings and goings there at Downing Street. Tony Blair, of course, not there at Gleneagles. Do we know anything about what his intentions are?
Well, I already asked this morning whether there was any intention to have the Prime Minister come back to number 10. At the moment, they're saying nothing, but no, the intention was that he would stay up at the G8 summit, and it was being handled here by the Home Secretary just at the moment, although, as I said, the police are in overall command, actually on the ground. So at the moment, we don't think there's any movement. That, of course, may all change. It just depends what happens over the next few hours. And, of course, the Mayor was also not in town, of course, over in Singapore for the announcement of the Olympics in 2012. So the Mayor of London away too. The two, I suppose, biggest dignitaries here, if you like, when it comes to looking after anything like a big incident in the capital. But at the moment, no, we haven't heard anything more.
All right, Joe Coburn there in Downing Street. Thanks a lot.
Well, let's speak now to Mike Granatt, who's an expert on government contingency planning and response. He was formerly with the Cabinet Office. He's now in our Millbank studio. So, under circumstances like this, what is the strategy?
Well, the strategy quite clearly is firstly to get people safe. So the first thing the police will have done, of course, is, and the other emergency services, will be to check that anybody who's involved is getting the right treatment and is removed from the scene to hospital if necessary. There will also be an immediate move to contain the scene, and quickly following in from rescuing people will be the search for evidence for what's happened there, so a judgment can be made on what's happened from a forensic science point of view.
It is now just a couple of minutes over 3 hours since this emergency started. How's it going?
In operational terms, from what I can see, and I've just walked through the centre of London, it seems to be going fairly smoothly, and it's much as one would expect. There's always a great thirst, of course, for precise information on who it might have been. That, while it's important, is going to be a secondary issue. And in fact, as far as I know, and I've talked to a source, there is no real clue yet to who this might have been, although some of the signs are obvious.
Public transport has been disabled, according to the Met Police Commissioner. So what are people to do? His advice was that they should stay put.
It's very good advice. If you can't move anyway, the best thing to do is to stay put. And, of course, to stay in touch with what's going on through television and radio. Television and radio now form a very important part of the link between between government and the police and the public. And normally, every effort would be made to make sure that information was relayed via television and radio to make sure people knew what was going on. It's bound to have an effect on the public transport system. Clearly, if you've had attacks that affect the public transport system, one of the first things you'll start to do is to look on the public transport system elsewhere for devices that might not have gone off, for example.
Give us some feel for what it's like just to be in central London this morning. I mean, how did you get to our studio in Westminster? What was it like? What did you see? What did you hear?
Well, I was sitting in a hotel on top of Charing Cross Station when the news came through. The first thing that happened in there, I was having breakfast with somebody, the first thing that happened there was people immediately picked up their cell phones and started to ring home, or their cell phones started to ring. And one effect that's happened, of course, is that the cell phone system is very heavily loaded and in some respects not working very well. People shouldn't be alarmed by that. It's designed to deal with these overloads, but it can't take everybody's call at once. So there are people trying to use cell phones. People in the street, and I say just walk down from Charing Cross Station, through Whitehall, past Parliament, down Millbank to these studios.
Let me just remind you, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner saying the transport system has been disabled. Confirmation of that with news that the Gatwick Express has been suspended here this morning. Let's head to one of the hospitals, the Royal London Hospital now, and our correspondent, Nick Thatcher.
Matthew, within the past few minutes, the hospital here, the Royal London Hospital based in Whitechapel, has issued a statement. A total of 95 casualties have been brought into the hospital so far. Many are being treated for minor injuries such as superficial cuts. However, 10 patients are seriously ill and 7 patients are in a critical condition. Let's get more, because Paul White, who's the chief executive of the hospital, can tell us more. It's incredibly difficult for your staff in there at the moment, isn't it?
It is. They're coping. They're trained well to do this kind of thing. We have a lot of casualties coming in. We're now well over 100 casualties into the department. But our staff, as I said, are experienced, they're professional, and this is the type of event that they're trained up to cope with.
You're saying you're seeing a lot of superficial cuts. However, you have 10 patients who are seriously ill. What sort of injuries are you seeing?
Well, a lot of orthopaedic serious injuries, bone fractures, some patients with severe limb damage, burns as well. So there's quite a range of quite severe injury.
And do you know where these casualties are being brought from to you?
From various underground stations. It will depend on the ease of route for the ambulances. Aldgate East is we're obviously the closest hospital to that. Liverpool Street and some of the other surface events that have taken place have sent casualties in as well.
And we've seen a number of buses arrive throughout the morning as well, bringing walking wounded.
Yes, there are indeed. We've had at least three double-decker buses turn up at A&E, which is really unprecedented.
Paul White, we have to leave it there. Many thanks indeed. That's the latest from the Royal London Hospital.
Nick Thatcher there. It's 12 o'clock. You're watching a BBC News special.
There have been a series of explosions on the public transport system in London during the morning rush hour, which police fear could have been a coordinated attack. Scotland Yard say there have been 7 explosions across the capital. 2 people have been confirmed dead at Aldgate Station, and there are dozens of casualties. The Prime Minister is to make a statement in the next couple of moments from the G8 summit in Gleneagles.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, told us he's concerned that this is a coordinated attack. Arab sources who monitor Al-Qaeda have told the BBC they believe today's explosions in London are almost certainly the work of Al-Qaeda.
Well, let me just take you to the recent pictures of the blast, as, of course, the emergency services deal with the series of explosions and the scores and scores of casualties that we have heard about. Sir Ian Blair, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, saying there had been many injured, not at the time we spoke to him putting any sort of figure on it, but as you see, the facts emerging, the scenes emerging, those casualty figures becoming a little clearer, with Nick Thatcher there at one hospital, the Royal London, just telling us a few moments ago that 95 so far have been taken to that hospital. And there you see a map of central London with all of the different locations of where the incidents have been taking place this morning. Edgware Road, Tavistock Place, that of course is where the double-decker bus, and there the picture of that bus with no top deck, the whole of the roof blown away by the explosion there this morning. And there were unofficial reports of certainly one fatality there at the scene, but dozens more walking away seriously injured there. The moving pictures of that scene. Well, Tony Blair just arriving there at the microphones at Gleneagles.
I'm just going to make a short statement to you on the terrible events that have happened in London earlier today. And I hope you understand that at the present time we're still trying to establish exactly what has happened. And there's a limit to what information I can give you. And I'll simply try and tell you the information as best I can at the moment. It's reasonably clear that there have been a series of terrorist attacks in London. There are obviously casualties, both people that have died and people seriously injured. And our thoughts and prayers, of course, are with the victims and their families. It's my intention to leave the G8 within the next couple of hours and go down to London and get a report face-to-face with the police and the emergency services and the ministers that have been dealing with this, and then to return later this evening. It is the will of all the leaders at the G8, however, that the meeting should continue in my absence, that we should continue to discuss the issues that we were going to discuss and reach the conclusions which we were going to reach. Each of the countries around that table has some experience of the effects of terrorism, and all the leaders, as they will indicate a little bit later, share our complete resolution to defeat this terrorism. It's particularly barbaric that this has happened on a day when people are meeting to try to help the problems of poverty in Africa and the long-term problems of climate change and the environment. Just as it is reasonably clear that this is a terrorist attack or a series of terrorist attacks, it's also reasonably clear that it is designed and aimed to coincide with the opening of the G8. There will be time to talk later about this. It's important, however, that those engaged in terrorism realize that our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people in a desire to impose extremism on the world. Whatever they do, it is our determination that they will never succeed in destroying what we hold dear in this country and in other civilized nations throughout the world. Thank you.
Well, the Prime Minister starting that brief statement at Gleneagles saying there was no question we've seen a series of terrorist attacks. He made his intention clear. He plans to leave the G8 summit and head back to London for a whole series of face-to-face meetings. And he said the other G8 leaders shared his commitment to defeat terrorism, and he concluded by saying our commitment is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction.
But he said he would leave Gleneagles in the next couple of hours and go to London to get first-hand reports from police. But he would return to Gleneagles this evening, all being well. And he said the summit would go ahead. That is what the world's leaders who've turned up in Scotland want to happen. They don't want terrorism to interfere with their deliberations.
Yes, as we see some of the recent pictures from the scene, a clearly, visibly shocked Tony Blair giving that brief statement at Gleneagles.
We're expecting a statement from the Home Secretary in the Commons very shortly. Charles Clarke did make a brief statement after a Cabinet meeting this morning. Cabinet was meeting for its regular Thursday morning meeting when these first reports came in at about 10 to 9 of trouble on the tube and talk of a power surge and so on. And they remained in session for a couple of hours while they were briefed by security officials about what had happened and how the government should respond to it.
Well, we're joined by Guto Harri, our political correspondent. And Guto, you were listening there and watching the Prime Minister and a visibly shocked Tony Blair.
Tony Blair has talked on many occasions very intimately about his greatest fear. What keeps him awake at night is this kind of thing happening. And you could see today that his worst nightmare, as far as he's concerned, seems to be happening. He was very calm, very determined about what he's going to do. He's going to be heading back to London in a couple of hours. He wants to clearly speak to the people who've suffered from this, speak to the people dealing with this, and actually just try and get some sort of grip on the situation, because the ultimate irony, and he said the sort of barbarism of this, the particularly barbaric element, is that he is in Scotland discussing how to alleviate poverty, global warming, third world debt, all those things, and back at home on his watch, as he often describes it, this has happened.
And we've heard him on several occasions over the past 2 years talk about the inevitability about attacks on London, but it makes it no easier when the moment comes.
No, the only thing he'll be wishing to do, and all his ministers have been doing today, Geoff Hoon, the leader of the House of Commons, stressing this in the Commons, Charles Clarke, who will be addressing the Commons before long, but as Home Secretary making clear, there are well-established procedures in place. They have been preparing for this. They haven't been sitting around thinking, let's hope that this kind of event never happens, which is why you see all these emergency procedures being put in place in terms of hospitals being ready, the transport system being shut down, the police moving in certain ways. They have been preparing for this. Doesn't make it any easier, but that's the message they want to get across, to offer as much reassurance as they possibly can at the moment in this changing and very anxious situation.
Guto Harri, thanks very much. Let's speak to the BBC's security correspondent, Frank Gardner. And Frank, you heard Tony Blair say there, no question that this is a series of terrorist attacks.
I think it's very important to keep an open mind at the moment as to who might be behind this. Yes, it's obviously terrorism. This is a series of coordinated attacks. But I would say that they are actually quite calibrated. Horrific as the attacks are and the casualties are, they're not on the scale of Bali or Madrid, the Madrid bombing last year, which killed around 200 people, and Bali a similar number. Clearly, these attacks were designed to paralyse the London transport system, to basically hit London and hit Britain where it hurts. So to do that, they don't actually need to kill a lot of people. They just need to make London transport freeze up, however temporary it is, and to cause a climate of fear. So at the moment, there are no claims of responsibility. We're watching the websites to see who it is. Actually, as we speak, I've just been handed a note here from our monitoring service saying that we have just located a website, a 200-word statement issued by Tanzim Qa'adat al-Jihad in Europe, which means the organization of Al-Qaeda and Jihad in Europe, claiming responsibility for the London bombings. BBC Monitoring are processing the statement at the moment to translate it. Now, it may be genuine, it may not. Often when these things happen, a lot of people who have nothing to do with it put out statements, but I think that is very significant. That's the same phraseology that's used by Al-Qaeda's organization in Iraq, very similar to the phrase that they use. So I have to say that would not surprise me if it was Al-Qaeda related. But just bear in mind, by their standards, these are relatively small casualties. They've gone for effect rather than for mass casualties.
Now, we were reporting an hour or so ago, Arab sources who you had spoken to who monitor Al-Qaeda and their views on it, what were they saying to you?
They hadn't seen anything specific, but they were convinced that this was Al-Qaeda related, that it would fit into their pattern. The UK is an enemy as far as Al-Qaeda is concerned, not only for its role in connection with the State of Israel, but more recently with the UK military role in Iraq in both the invasion and continued military presence there, and Afghanistan, of course. So both politicians and security people have been saying for a long time, Britain is a target. It's inevitable that they will try and attack us, and very sadly, this has come true.
And you mentioned the inevitability of this, and I mentioned that to Guto with the Prime Minister, who's used that phrase before. But the London transport network has always been viewed as very high on the possible lists of targets.
It has, although interestingly, the threat level, which is kept secret, but the threat level that the security and intelligence community use in Britain was lowered recently in terms of international terrorism. It was lowered to what's called substantial, which still means that they're on their guard, but it meant that they weren't aware of any specific plot. So this does seem to have come slightly out of the blue. Of course, had it come a day earlier, it would have been even more embarrassing just before the Olympic decision.
All right, Frank Gardner for now. Thanks very much.
Now, Scotland Yard have just been saying, confirming in fact what the Metropolitan Chief Commissioner said a few minutes ago, that there have been 6 explosions at tube stations, and these are the places: Edgware Road, King's Cross, Liverpool Street, Russell Square, Aldgate East and Moorgate. And there's been 1 confirmed explosion on a bus. Earlier there were reports of possibly 3 buses exploding, but it seems like that could relate, these various reports, to the 1 bus. That is in Tavistock Square. And we're also hearing from the London Ambulance Service that it's not all over. We're hearing that their staff at King's Cross have started a rescue service. People are still trapped at King's Cross. Elsewhere, we're hearing various reports of all this rippling through the city. In the Lloyd's building in London, we've had an email for someone there saying that tightened security, everyone's being searched going into the building. People have been advised to stay put. And on the financial markets, the FTSE is down and the pound is down.
Well, Phil, mentioning that ongoing rescue operation at King's Cross, let me just repeat that because that is news just coming into us, that the ambulance service is saying currently a rescue operation is going on at King's Cross with a tube train stuck in one of the tunnels, and it is being reported that there are fatalities in this incident. Well, Mark Easton, our Home Affairs editor, is there at King's Cross. And just, Mark, bring us right up to date in terms of what you know there at the moment.
Right now is a very large operation involving the emergency services. I can see at least 7 or 8 ambulances which have been arriving over the last few minutes or so. The fire brigade have been very active, taking into King's Cross itself a large amount of equipment. I saw huge fans going in, great long yellow pipes going in. I suspect this is just to try and get the smoke out of the tunnels. What I've seen over the last few hours is increasingly severely injured people being brought out of the station and taken to a series of double-decker buses which have been lined up just on the side of King's Cross station where they're being treated. Most of them were walking wounded. Many were clearly very distressed and shocked by what had happened. Many were in tears. Others had injuries to their feet, to their heads and faces. I saw one woman who was in a wheelchair who had really quite severe injuries to her leg. Another woman in an ambulance who was being given oxygen also had injuries to her leg, which were certainly a lot of blood, but it was difficult to tell how severely injured she was. But right now at King's Cross, above ground at least, we have an extraordinary eerie silence around. The traffic has all stopped, the vehicles are all there, but clearly a huge amount of activity activity going on inside the station, out of my sight, and involved in this rescue operation.
As you speak, more information is coming in from the ambulance service confirming that rescue operation is currently ongoing. They say, quote, there are many casualties and we believe deaths involved. And speaking across the 7 incidents in London, they are also quoting a large number of casualties without putting any specific figure on it. So a large number of casualties. Going back to that rescue, Mark, do we know at all any sort of figure about the amount of people still trapped in this train?
I don't know of that at all. All I can tell you is what I've seen above ground, which is significant numbers of people who were clearly caught up close to the explosion and were covered in black soot from what they told me was a billowing smoke which spread through the trains and down the tunnels and onto the station itself. Those people are still being removed. I'm too far away now. As you can imagine, we've been moved back by the security services and police as the hours have gone by. There was I've seen sniffer dogs who've been going around. I mean, there's clearly still concern as to whether we have seen the last of the explosions. I saw a number of sniffer dogs checking out the perimeter of King's Cross, indeed the buses where the injured were being treated. I saw them sniffing bins and going along the platforms of the mainline station. So there's a lot of activity still going on. As I speak, I can see the first of the ambulances which have been lined up here, which have been arriving over the last few minutes or so. The first one of those has just sped off at high speed. Now, we know that ambulances are only being used at this stage for people with life-threatening conditions. So one has to assume that ambulance has already been loaded up with people removed from the station. It's now, 12:15, so this is over 3 hours since the incident began.
Mark Easton there at King's Cross. Thank you very much.
Now, just gone 12:15. Let's update you. Tony Blair has confirmed London has been hit by a series of terrorist attacks after 7 explosions crippled the capital's transport system. Scores of people have been injured. At least 2 people have been killed. At King's Cross, a rescue operation is underway to release people trapped on the Underground. The London Underground has been shut down and all bus services in central London have been suspended.
Train services into the capital are seriously affected. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, said the coordinated blasts were associated with underground stations at Edware Road, King's Cross, Liverpool Street, Russell Square, Aldgate East and Moorgate. The other explosion occurred on a bus in Tavistock Square. Sir Ian said the situation remained confused and he urged people to stay where they were and not attempt to move around London.
The Prime Minister, who's in Gleneagles for the G8 summit, said, whatever they do, it is our determination that they will never succeed in destroying what we hold dear in this country and other civilized nations in the world. He will return to London in the next few hours. Government ministers are meeting to discuss the situation. The Home Secretary, Charles Clarke, says he'd be making a statement to the House of Commons later today. He said the public would be kept informed of developments at regular intervals. Arab sources who monitor Al-Qaeda have told the BBC they believe today's explosions in London are almost certainly the work of Al-Qaeda.
Well, let's speak now to our political editor, Andrew Marr, who's at Gleneagles, where we saw the Prime Minister only a short while ago make that statement. And Andrew, clearly shocked Tony Blair making those brief comments.
That's absolutely right. And the first difficult decision he had to make was whether to suspend this summit, an absolutely crucial day when it comes to discussing Africa and indeed global warming. But after a discussion around the table, everybody wanted the summit to continue. That's clearly his intention as well. He will be going down to London, I imagine, within an hour or two. He will there meet the emergency services. He will be briefed by the police, no doubt by other political colleagues, and then he's coming back here. That's his intention, at any rate, to the summit to carry on this evening.
And he made it clear that, of course, this was an issue that affects all the world leaders and underlined all of their commitment to defeat terrorism?
Well, I mean, as he pointed out, around the table are a lot of people whose countries have had direct experience of terrorism themselves. Whatever view they took about the Iraq war, everybody here expressed sympathy and support immediately. We don't know yet who is going to, as it were, take the chair for Britain while the Prime Minister is away, but it was very interesting that he was so certain about the terrorist word. He used the word immediately, and that he talked about extremism, making it clear, I think, that he also believes this to be either the work of Al-Qaeda or an associated group.
And we were speaking to Guto Harri a short while ago, and he was telling us for years Tony Blair has anticipated this moment, thought of this moment. Guto was saying it has kept him up at night. It makes it no easier when the moment actually arrives.
No easier, and he was clearly extremely upset, I think, when he talked to us. It was obvious. Only yesterday he was as up as we've ever seen him. Today he was looking pretty shattered by the news. He's, of course, had to greet a whole series of world leaders. They've been coming in, notwithstanding, from South Africa, from Mexico, from all around the world, from India. And he has to go through all of those formalities. He has to meet all those people, and the talking here carries on. But of course, his mind must be entirely elsewhere. It is a difficult thing for him. Don't forget that large chunks of London, certainly around Westminster, are already intensively fortified. Secret Service, the police are crawling over them the whole time, trying to guess where the terrorist strike will come. And there's no doubt that in terms of trying to get global publicity, this was a very clever moment to strike, because the world is focused on Britain at the moment. The world is focused on the G8, and this will have ricocheted around the world even more aggressively and formidably than it would have done had there been no G8.
And Andrew, as you were saying, and as we heard, Tony Blair making it clear he's heading back to London to start all of those meetings. And of course, this is something that they have very clearly over the years planned for. They have very set committees for this and the sorts of meetings that have to take place. But it is interesting to listen to the language both from politicians and the police. A real effort this morning to calm public anxiety.
That's right, because unless everybody is wrong about what we think's happened, hideous though these attacks have been, they have not caused the loss of life on the scale of an Omar, never mind Madrid or anything like that. They are designed to cause maximum disruption. They're designed to bring a city of, about 7 million people now to a complete standstill. They're designed to hit the economy as well as the national mood and morale. And it's part of the job of a political leader at a time like this to try and minimise all of that, to try to ensure that insofar as it's possible, the country gets back to normal life as quickly as possible.
Andrew Marr there at Gleneagles. Thanks very much.
You're watching a BBC News special with Matthew Amroliwala and Sophie Raworth. The time is nearly 12:25. Just some of the latest information coming in for you. Hospitals across London have been put on full alert, taking casualties from this morning's explosions. We're hearing that more than 100 casualties and one of the dead have been taken to the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel. Similar scenes across London at other hospitals. Let's go now to our correspondent Richard Lister. He's at the University College Hospital. Richard, tell us the latest there.
Well, UCH is located in central London, very close to some of the sites which have been affected by the explosions today. It's near to King's Cross, it's near to Tavistock Square, which is just a few streets that way where the bus exploded. And it has been doing a lot of coordination with the other hospitals to ensure that they have the right facilities in place for the patients as and when they need them. Now, up until about an hour or so ago, no patients had actually come to UCH. They were all being treated on the ground. They'd only seen one or two walking wounded, but we have seen over the last hour lots of ambulances going through this area, which is cordoned off behind me, to some of the emergency scenes and bringing patients back. And we're told from UCH that they will have some patient numbers fairly soon. But this area of London is usually, on any usual workday, absolutely crawling with cars. It's one of the busiest parts of central London. Today, as you can see, there was no traffic moving up and down. The only things we've seen coming down here are ambulances, police vehicles and an emergency blood donation response unit as well was through here just a little while before you came to me. So UCH, as I say, has got a control room set up. It is liaising with the other hospitals. There was an emergency response plan in place. I was talking to some of the staff at UCH about that a little while ago. They were saying basically that went very well. They were very pleased with the response. Everybody is issued with pages. Everybody has a printed card which says exactly what their role is in this kind of emergency. And they say, as far as they're concerned, they've been able to respond as quickly as they would have hoped.
And Richard, we're hearing that at some hospitals they're literally bringing in the casualties on double-decker buses.
Well, yes, and I think that has been part of the problem. Initially, I think the problem was the fact that the streets were so choked with people, as some roads were blocked off and other roads were left open. There was just gridlock in parts of London, and it was almost impossible to get ambulances out. Now, London Ambulance Service earlier on today said that they would only respond to life-threatening incidents. That was really a message to everybody else who wasn't involved in the incidents here, saying, look, we are at capacity now. It is very difficult for us to get to people. At the best of times, we can only really afford to deal with the incidents taking place here. So it has been a problem getting people in and out, and that might be one of the reasons why it took UCH such a long time to get people here.
Richard Lister, thank you very much.
Let me just remind you, we're expecting Charles Clarke in the House of Commons within the next few minutes. As soon as that starts, we'll cross that there and take that live. That is the scene there currently, a packed House of Commons. Let me show you new pictures, though, from Tavistock Square and the bus that was, as you can clearly see there in the centre of your screen, totally destroyed by the explosion there in Tavistock Square, with the whole of the roof ripped off. We were seeing the pictures earlier from the other angle, but the police allowing a new photograph to be circulated, that whole area cordoned off. And of course, we know that there were many casualties at this scene, one of the 7 scenes in London earlier today, and there were unofficial reports of 1 fatality at this location. There, the very latest picture from Tavistock Square. The time is creeping up to 12:30, so let us just bring you the latest facts and details as we have them. And there, as you see on the map, 7 explosions now. The Metropolitan Police telling us, I will list them, and you see them there on the map. Edgware Road, King's Cross, Liverpool Street, Russell Square, Aldgate East, Moorgate, and the bus in Tavistock Square we were just looking at. 7 explosions, at least 2 people dead, we're told, scores more injured, and their information that the underground system, the bus system, suspended with possible Al-Qaeda links. Those the latest facts of what has happened in London this morning.
Let's talk now to James Munro, who is at New Scotland Yard. James, what's the latest from there?
Well, Sophie, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, has arrived here, and he'll have gone straight through to the control room behind me, where they are coordinating London's emergency plan. On the one hand, they're coordinating the evacuation of all those casualties and trying to bring some normality back to the streets of London. You've seen all the images of how this is a city in gridlock. But on the other hand, they're also trying to establish what exactly happened this morning. And a key question, was it coordinated? You spoke about those 7 explosions. We believe that there was a rough timescale of around 45 minutes, which does suggest something coordinated along the lines of what we saw in Madrid and what we saw in Bali. There will also, no doubt, be an investigation as to whether there has been a suicide bombing involved. We did hear that there was evidence of explosive materials found at least at one site. And if there has been a suicide bomber involved, that would be the first time we've ever seen that sort of terrorist tactic on mainland Britain.
How much information have police been able to give about the number of casualties so far?
Sophie, I apologise. I'm not hearing you very clearly. I just wanted also to tell you that from inside Scotland Yard itself, there's very little information coming up, but they want to come up with several clear messages. First of all, they're trying to tell people here in London that just to stay where they are. Don't try to use public transport because it's simply not working at the moment, and also don't use the emergency service telephone numbers, unless it really is an emergency, they're at full stretch, and they need all those resources. One other line for you. There was no information, there was no warning, and there's been no claim so far as to who may have done this. And certainly before this, there was no idea of any terrorist attack imminent. And so the result was that the level of security was at a medium state of alert. It's now up at a high state of alert across police stations and government offices across London. Sophie.
James, I hope you can hear me, but I was just wondering whether or not the police are giving any clear idea about the number of casualties we're dealing with now.
As yet, we have no figures from Scotland Yard itself. We have been made aware that there have been fatalities at more than one location, but there are no figures and no exact figures of casualties. But certainly speaking to your correspondents in the various hospitals around London and speaking to eyewitnesses, you get a sense that there is a substantial number of casualties and a number of fatalities involved as well.
James Munro at New Scotland Yard, thank you very much.
Now, let me tell you, a few moments ago I was telling you that Charles Clarke would make that statement in the next few minutes. The House of Commons suspended in the last few moments, and we're hearing that at 12:50, so in 20 minutes' time, Charles Clarke will return to the chamber and make that statement. That, the very latest information coming from the House of Commons. Well, let's go to another of our studios in Westminster, speak to Crispin Black from the Risk Advisory Group. And Crispin, thank you for joining us this morning. Your reaction in terms of what we have seen in London today?
Well, I walked down to the studio in Millbank from Russell Square where I work, and certainly the incidents around Russell Square, Tavistock Square seem to be being controlled in a calm and professional manner by the police. And contrary to some of the reporting you've seen, there is no chaos on the streets. There were traffic jams. So overall, I mean, it's early days yet, a hideous day, but I think a sense that maybe the crisis is controllable.
We heard Tony Blair only a short while ago saying, no doubt in his mind, these were terrorist attacks. I assume you would share that belief?
Absolutely, and I think it's looking increasingly likely. I gather there are one or two remarks posted on various websites around the world claiming the attacks for various Islamist terrorist groups. Now, every Islamist, Tom, Dick and Harry will probably try and claim them, but my guess is, my best assessment is these look like Islamist extremist attacks, either by groups operating on their own, but certainly with groups connected in some way to Al-Qaeda.
Just tell us a little more of your thinking in terms of Al-Qaeda, because of course with the nature of these attacks, the coordinated nature of the attacks, that is the group that would spring to most people's mind.
I think that's true, and the attacks are uncannily, eerily similar, insofar as we can tell, to the attacks in Madrid. So although the forensic details and everything will be coming out in the days to come, at this stage, I think it's reasonable to make a working assumption that it is Al-Qaeda related.
You did a lot of work post-September the 11th. Just take us through the types of things government will be doing as we speak.
Well, I think the first thing that you will be seeing, and that's probably why the Prime Minister is flying back to London, is that COBRA, the overall coordinating machinery in the Cabinet Office to control big incidents, dramas like this, will now be in session. Now, that can be chaired by a minister, and often is, but on a day like this, you could expect it to be chaired by the Prime Minister personally, as it was indeed on 9/12. So all the coordinating and response and anticipatory machinery will now be in high gear, and it's particularly designed to make it easy for our senior politicians to take control of the situation.
Crispin Black, thank you very much.
Well, a short time ago, the Prime Minister gave this statement from the G8 summit in Scotland.
It's reasonably clear that there have been a series of terrorist attacks in London. There are obviously casualties, both people that have died and people seriously injured. And our thoughts and prayers, of course, are with the victims and their families. It's my intention to leave the G8 within the next couple of hours and go down to London and get a report face-to-face with the police and the emergency services and the ministers that have been dealing with this, and then to return later this evening. It is the will of all the leaders at the G8, however, that the meeting should continue in my absence, that we should continue to discuss the issues that we were going to discuss and reach the conclusions which we were going to reach. Each of the countries around that table has some experience of the effects of terrorism, and all the leaders, as they will indicate a little bit later, share our complete resolution to defeat this terrorism. It's particularly barbaric that this has happened on a day when people are meeting to try to help the problems of poverty in Africa and the long-term problems of climate change and the environment. Just as it is reasonably clear that this is a terrorist attack or a series of terrorist attacks, it's also reasonably clear that it is designed and aimed to coincide with the opening of the G8. There will be time to talk later about this. It's important, however, that those engaged in terrorism realize that our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people in a desire to impose extremism on the world. Whatever they do, it is our determination that they will never succeed in destroying what we hold dear in this country and in other civilized nations throughout the world. Thank you.
Well, that was Tony Blair speaking at Gleneagles before he makes his way back down to London. Now, a short while ago, I spoke to Sir Ian Blair, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, and he told me what he understood had happened this morning.
The situation is confused, but it is slowly clearing, and the messages that I need to give are that the Metropolitan Police, in accordance with the London Emergency Plan, is now coordinating London's response to these events. We think there are about 6 explosions. One of them is on a bus. The others are connected to tube stations. There are many casualties, but as I say, the London Emergency Plan is working and they are being taken to hospitals. There are just a series of very short messages at the moment that we need to give. The first is to stay where you are. All of London's transport is currently disabled or stopped, whether that's buses or trains. So the safest thing that everybody can do is to stay where they are. Secondly, please do not call the emergency services at the moment unless there is a life-threatening situation. And thirdly, that we will return with information as soon as possible. But it is a situation for which we have planned and prepared, and the emergency services are all working together as one, and we will soon be in a position to be able to clarify issues further.
You mentioned 6 explosions at the start of your answer. I wonder if you could just be specific and list exactly where those explosions are, because, of course, through the morning there have been so many different reports from so many different places.
As far as we know, there are events which may be explosions at Edware Road, at King's Cross, at Liverpool Street, at Russell Square, at Aldgate East and at Moorgate. But some of those, I mean, it is still, everybody has to understand, it is still a confusing situation in which reports are coming in from a number of places. And one of the things that would be most helpful is if the media in general do not speculate on what might be the causes, what might be everything else, and cause more alarm and concern than people will obviously feel at the moment. The situation is being controlled, and we will be able to give information as soon as possible.
You started the interview by saying there was a very clear emergency plan which has now been triggered, reassuring the public. Do you acknowledge that there will be a degree of panic, certainly, amongst people in central London?
Well,
there'll certainly be a degree of concern. People have seen the pictures, they know the accounts, but this is a very large city in which a very significant and sophisticated emergency operation is now swinging into effect. We are connecting to the other police forces, the City of London, the British Transport Police. We're connected to the LAS, and we are gradually bringing order to the situation. The message is that if you have not so far been affected, then just stay exactly where you are for the time being until the situation clears. We will be opening a casualty bureau very shortly, and that casualty bureau number will be made public.
You mentioned many casualties. What is the number that you're thinking of? Are you talking about scores or are you talking about hundreds?
Well, of course, it's very difficult to give that answer, because if we have got a situation in which events have taken place in the underground or with an explosion on a bus, there will be lots of flying glass, there will be people inhaling smoke and so on. So to give a total number, I think, would be inappropriate. What I do know is that we're operating a proper triage system, and the most serious casualties will already be in treatment, and others who are described on one or other of the programme as walking wounded will be treated in due course. I just really want to reassure the public that the situation is steadily coming under control, and we will then start to understand exactly what has happened.
Do you know of fatalities at the moment?
I'm not prepared to say that at the moment, because I just do not know either the detail or the numbers. The important message is stay where you are, stay safe, don't travel because there's not much ability to travel, and that the Casualty Bureau will be opening soon. Thanks very much.
You spoke of the 6 explosions. Just take us through the moment that you heard of the first one, and how soon the second, third, fourth and fifth happened after that.
I'm not going to get into that level of detail. I've got to give out a number of public service messages like this, but we will be holding further news broadcasts in due course. Thanks very much.
Do you have So Ian Blair speaking to me a short while ago, and actually since he spoke to me, police now confirming 7 explosions rather than 6 that he said there at the start of that interview.
And just some advice from Westminster Council bosses to parents who've got children at school in London today. They're saying that at the moment schools are being advised to continue normal activities but to remain on site until they have further information. They're saying regular updates are being made to head teachers. Advice is going to be issued later in the day about arrangements for the end of the school day. But they are stressing to parents that pupils should remain within school buildings for now.
Well, we were showing you just a moment ago the map of the 7 locations of the 7 explosions. One of those explosions, of course, was at Edware Road station. And there the map showing you just how close all these stations are, the 7 places where there are reports of explosions through the course of the morning. Now, eyewitnesses at Edware Road spoke to us shortly afterwards and described what they saw at the scene.
This morning? I've just come in towards Edware Road station, and then also there's this explosion. Big white appeared, and then it was just smoke everywhere. In the tunnel, we was trying to close the doors because there was just smoke, you couldn't breathe. And we all got down low to get under the smoke because it was just like so much there. And after about 10 minutes, the smoke disappeared and was able to open everything up, but there was so much screaming and people saying help. So it was a bit frightening.
Did you see anyone hurt?
We was in the carriage back and to one. So when we went past, there was like hardly any train left. It was all in pieces. There was pieces on the track as well, everywhere.
There was just a train was passing another train in the tunnel just outside Edware Road, and there was a huge bang, and our train, all the lights went out and there was a lot of smoke. I believe it's the second carriage. There's quite a lot of injured people in it.
Now, many of those people have been taken to hospitals across London. The latest we're hearing at the moment is doctors at University College Hospital near Tavistock Place said they have begun receiving casualties. This is just a few moments ago, but they cannot yet comment on the numbers or the extent of their injuries. But they do say they're hoping to give fuller details within the hour. And just to give you an idea of the number of ambulances involved in today's operation, an Essex ambulance service spokesman said 10 ambulances have been sent to London. 20% of the Essex fleet, that is being sent into London. All ambulances now, unless they are for other crucial life-saving operations, all ambulances now being concentrated on the situation in central London today.
A quick look at the clock, and we're only now 5 minutes away from that statement in the House of Commons from Charles Clarke. As soon as the Home Secretary stands up, we'll be there to take that live. Let's speak, though, in the meantime, from Manchester to Chris Yates, an expert in transport security and editor of Jane's Aviation Security. Thank you for joining us. And what is your analysis of what we have seen today?
I'm sad to say that I think it was pretty inevitable that at some point, sometime in the future, the transportation system in London would be attacked. We have had, over these recent years, all of the rehearsals in preparation for the possibility of a terrorist attack in London, and this is a very sad day that it actually has happened.
And you mentioned the various plans, and we've seen those kick in immediately in terms of right from 9 o'clock this morning, the hospitals and all of the emergency services.
The coordinated plan for dealing with such an event in London has indeed worked very well from what we see at the moment. Of course, all of these things have been rehearsed over time. The evacuation of the tube system, incidents happening on other transportation modes such as the rail network, the bus network, and indeed the aviation industry. So those processes that are in place, they've worked terribly well indeed thus far.
And in terms of who may have carried out these attacks, what are your thoughts?
Well, Frank Gardner, of course, earlier on suggested that this might have been carried out, from what BBC Monitoring picked up, an Al-Qaeda, a European Al-Qaeda cell. I think we have to be very careful at this moment, of course, to put too much credence on that. As often happens in terror incidents like this, there are a number of groups that occasionally claim responsibility for the attack itself. We need to wait for the authorities to confirm that this was indeed an Al-Qaeda plot.
Chris Yates, thanks for your time.
Now, we've been hearing plenty of harrowing reports from eyewitnesses this morning about the scenes that took place just before 9 o'clock this morning. We can hear now from one woman who was on the Underground at King's Cross at the time of the blasts.
Just horrendous, just like a disaster movie. You just can't ever imagine being somewhere like that, you know? Just, you know, you're just wanting to get out, to be honest. Just want to get out, and I just kept closing my eyes and just trying to think of the outside, and as soon as I got outside, I just, you know, started crying because it was...
How did you get out?
Awful. Well, obviously the London Underground police started loading everyone off from the back of the train, so we just all walked through the train, and then I had to walk along the tracks, obviously back to King's Cross actual station.
How far was that then?
It was probably about a 15-minute walk, and then obviously the really injured people were being brought through the crowds, and there was some, you know, pretty nasty bleeding and stuff. And then, yeah, then when we got out, obviously we sort of sat inside the station for a bit, and then we got evacuated from there, and we had to sit on double-decker buses for we sat on them for about an hour and a half, I think, in the end, and then we got a police escort to the hospital, so...
And what's it like inside the
hospital?
hospital?
The hospital's really good, actually. I was saying earlier, it's a really well-organised operation. Yeah, there's absolutely loads of doctors, everyone's being signed in. I didn't really see much, to be honest. I think there's just lots of minor cuts and people with bleeding legs and things like that. I didn't really see anything really bad, but I was in like a minors unit, so...
Do you feel lucky then?
Yeah, no, I do feel lucky, yeah. Obviously, I haven't had access to any TV, and I've heard a few things about what else has gone on. Obviously, thoughts go out to any families that know anyone that's been involved.
One woman's account of the horrific scenes that took place just before 9 o'clock this morning. And just to recap on what has happened this morning, at least 7 explosions have ripped through London in a series of blasts, leaving dozens feared dead and crippling the capital. The capital has been brought to a standstill. All underground services suspended, all bus services suspended. The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, has said that it is reasonably clear that there have been a series of terrorist attacks, and he said that it was clear people have died and many are injured. And the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, says a total of 6 underground blasts and 1 bus blast have been confirmed, but he says there may have been further incidents.
Let's hear now from one of the policemen controlling the situation around the Edware Road area, Superintendent John Morgan. He's just been speaking to reporters near the scene. Let's hear a little of what he's been saying.
We can tell you that there have been a number of casualties, some serious casualties, as well as what the London Ambulance Service term walking wounded, and there have been a number of fatalities. I'm unable to give you the exact number for any of those categories at the moment, because things are still relatively confused.
Could you describe to us what happened?
I understand that shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, there was an explosion on board one of the trains in the Edware Road tube station, which has affected another train and led to the damage and the casualties that we've seen today.
And can you describe the damage?
I haven't been down to the platform myself. It is a crime scene. There are specialist officers working down there, and you'll appreciate that we are not going to disturb and get in the way of their work. If it proves to be a criminal act, then we do not want to jeopardise the evidence that's recoverable from that scene.
How would you describe this incident?
Chaotic to start with, extremely well managed by all the emergency services thereafter. Extremely traumatic for those that we have seen come out of the tube station and who have been involved in some way, shape or form. That's it. Everybody's out of the tube station. Okay? Thank you very much indeed.
We'll keep you updated.
Well, that was Superintendent John Morgan just describing the situation at Edgware Road.
And just an update on the casualties we know of so far. A spokeswoman for Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital says 8 casualties, some critically injured, are being cared for, and staff there are following emergency procedures in preparation for more arrivals. The Royal Free Hospital in North London says it has now received 54 casualties. 10 of the patients have major injuries and others are suffering from minor injuries. And University College Hospital, the hospital nearest Tavistock Square, where the bus exploded and close to King's Cross, casualties are still being brought in there more than 3 hours after the blast. The spokeswoman there says the injured are in the tens rather than the hundreds so far, but she cannot confirm the exact number.
As we just stay on this map, which gives you a very clear geographical picture of where the blast actually happened, let me also tell you that we had been saying that Charles Clarke, the Home Secretary, would be making a statement in the House of Commons at 10 to 1. That is what we heard when the sitting was suspended, but we are now being told that has been put back to 1:15. So let me just underline that point. That statement from Charles Clarke will now happen in the House of Commons at 1:15. And Carole Walker, our political correspondent, is here with me. And Carole, no surprise, first of all, that there's any sort of slippage. There must be so many meetings currently taking place. But one of the things that Charles Clarke told us right at the outset, and seems to be happening, is that they plan to keep coming back and keeping the public right up to date.
Yes, that's right. Charles Clarke is clearly getting the latest up-to-date information from the police, from the security services. We understand that he has also given an undertaking to brief the opposition before he makes his statement to the House of Commons. Now, clearly, this is the sort of incident which the police have had to plan for some time.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Charles Clarke is getting to his feet, so let's cross there.
As the House will know, Mr. Speaker, there have this morning been a number of terrorist attacks in central London. The situation is developing, and I'm not yet in a position to give a conclusive account of all that has happened, but I wanted to keep the House as fully informed as possible. I want to begin by expressing on behalf of the whole country our sympathy for those injured and the friends and families of those who've died. I'm not in a position at this time to give precise details, but what I can say is that 4 explosions have been confirmed. First, on a tube train between Aldgate East and Liverpool Street. Second, on a bus in Woburn Place. Third, on a tube train between Russell Square and King's Cross. And fourth, on a tube train at Edgware Road Station. As yet, we do not know who or which organisations are responsible for these criminal and appalling acts. Of course, our first responsibility is to protect and support the public at this time. The Metropolitan Police are an operational command using well-established and tested procedures. The health services are providing first-class care and support. On transport, the underground is closed and will remain so for some time, but certainly closed today. There are no buses in central London. Transport for London will decide when to resume services later today. Overground services are subject to substantial delays. Most stations are open, but some are closed. Network Rail will try and reopen them as soon as they can. Airports are operating normally. People are strongly advised not to travel into central London, as the emergency services must be allowed to do their work in the most effective way that they can. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet was informed this morning, and since then I've chaired Coburn meetings to ensure that the whole government commitment is properly coordinated and any necessary support is provided. The Prime Minister is returning to London from Gleneagles to chair a Coburn meeting later today. I will continue to keep the House fully informed.
David Davis.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the Home Secretary for coming to the House so promptly this afternoon. We understand only too well the matters that constrained his time. And let me say at once that I join him in saying that the thoughts and prayers of this side of the House are with all those who were killed or injured earlier today, and indeed their families and friends too. And let me also pay tribute to the men and women of our emergency services. Their response to events such as this is invariably heroic, and we thank them from the bottom of our hearts. This morning's explosions were acts of almost unspeakable depravity and wickedness, planned with the deliberate intention of taking innocent life, and the whole House condemns them utterly. Yeah. This is not just an attack on our capital city, but on our country and our way of life as a whole. And it goes without saying that the government will have our full and wholehearted support in dealing with this assault on our society. We stand ready with them to play our part. I welcome the Prime Minister's assurance earlier today that the important work of the G8 meeting in Scotland will go on and will not be disrupted by today's terrible events. Now is not the time to allow the terrorists to disrupt our lives in any way. Now is also not the time for many questions. I have just three very straightforward ones for the Home Secretary. Could the Home Secretary tell the House what plans are being put in place to protect other British cities that may be at risk at this point in time? There's also obviously confusion at this time, but the most important thing is for the people to remain as calm as possible. To help with this, what plans does the government have in place to keep the public informed about events as the day unfolds? And finally, will the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary return to the House on Monday, when more information is known, to make a full statement on this terrible event? A prime aim of terrorists is to demoralise and divide our communities. It is right that we should be angry at today's atrocities, but it's no less essential that we should remain both clear-headed and united. We say to the terrorists, you will not succeed in setting us against one another. Britain has a long history of dealing with terrorism. We've joined together to fight it in the past. Today we do so again. For now, the terrorism that walks the streets of London has no face. But whatever its origin, whatever its motive, our response will be the same. The British people will not be cowed, and the terrorists will not win.
The Shadow Home Secretary David Davis there in speaking to the House of Commons, and the Home Secretary Charles Clarke, who reiterated or confirmed that there have been four explosions this morning.
Well, as we watch these continuing pictures, you've been watching a BBC News special about this morning's events in London, events that the Prime Minister says were reasonably clear. There have been a series of terrorist attacks in the capital. Now, let me tell you, we have continuing coverage. We join our colleagues for the 1 o'clock news, Hugh Edwards and Darren Jordan.
Central London is rocked by a series of terrorist attacks. Police speak of many casualties. The terrorists hit without warning at the height of the morning rush hour on the crowded transport system. The underground system was the main target. At least 5 stations were hit. The entire system is at a standstill. Police confirmed at least 2 people dead, but they warned that many have been seriously injured. The Prime Minister said the attacks were barbaric. He's leaving the G8 summit to return to London very shortly.
It's important, however, that those engaged in terrorism realise that our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people.
People are being warned to stay where they are and to avoid travelling until the situation is stabilised. The police are searching for more devices and they've activated the long-rehearsed emergency plan for a terrorist attack on London.